Hello everybody and welcome to the second of our April webinars. Yesterday we heard from Christopher Nordstrom and he was talking to you about Kanban and Lego. And today we are joined by Maaret and she is going to talk to you about mob testing better products through diversity. If you have any questions for Maaret about her webinar, if you want to question anything, if you have any feedback, please type your questions into the questions field on your control panel. And at the end of the webinar, we'll just have a look at your questions and go through them one by one. So let me hand you over to today's presenter, Maaret. Hi, Maaret.
Hi.
Now she's just opening up her screen there, everybody, and we'll be good to go. Great, there we are.
So, hello everyone. It's great to share this stuff with you. And we'll be spending the next about an hour on a topic named mob testing. And I wanted to kind of open up with the idea that we would have a bit of expectations on what we're going to be talking about. So mob testing is group testing. It is about having your whole team work together on one thing. And the specific aspect that we're talking about today on the group testing is joining in as a tester who usually doesn't program, joining into a mob, kind of bringing in very different perspective, very diverse ideas, very much feeling maybe that you don't even belong, and kind of giving you ideas on what that might still bring in to the group if you will, as a tester, join in. There were some comments before the webinar online that people were kind of confusing mob testing with mobile testing. So definitely you can do this form of testing, mob testing, with the mobile aspects, but we won't be drilling into anything mobile today. I've been a tester for about 20 years. So I have a tester background and I've been doing work related to mobbing, mob programming and mob testing for the last about 1.5 years. So that's the basis of today's presentation. We have three things that we're going to be covering today. First, we're going to be talking about what is mob testing and mob programming, so kind of defining for you all the basics. What are we talking about, what that means. Second, we're going to be looking at my mob testing experience, so I'm going to be sharing you some of the stories on how I ended up with mob testing and what it has taught me when I've been doing it for the last year. And the third part is the usual concerns. Whenever I share my stories, I'm noticing that there's certain questions that keep coming up again and again, so I'm trying to address some of them already early on with the third part of my presentation, and I'm welcoming any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. But let's kind of get us all together on what are we actually talking about. What is this mob testing and mob programming, and where does it come from? Mob programming is a way of working that was originated somewhere in the USA with a group of developers in a company called Hunter Industries about 4 years ago. One of the days, this group of developers decided that they had a particularly difficult problem to solve. And to solve that problem, they thought that it would be actually fun to get the whole team together, reserve a meeting room, and kind of like just, work on one computer, have everybody pitch into the problem. They were already used to this coding dojo type of practice sessions, so it kind of like just expanded from that. They enjoyed the collaborative work around one computer so much that mob programming grew out of that. And the idea with mob programming is that you have all the people with their great ideas and their great minds and their great abilities in the same room at the same time, working on the exact same thing and on the same computer. So you have just one computer. In this picture here, you might notice that the group doesn't look very regular or usual. There's a little girl, I think she was 8 at the time when this picture was taken. And this picture is from one conference where they were doing practice sessions on mob programming. And for a while, they were asking this little girl, she's the daughter of one of the participants here, They were asking this little girl if she wanted to join the mob, if she wanted to participate in adults practicing programming, and she was saying no. But after she watched them play for a while or do this thing for a while, taking turns around the keyboard, she said, hey, that's a game I can play. It looks fun. And she joined. And the story goes that she had a lot of fun and very much was a very productive team member in just, following the rules of what kind of things you do when you do test-driven development and you're solving a programming kata. So the idea is really that we have the whole team working on one computer, on one thing at a time. So that's mobbing. The thing we're talking about today is mob testing. And I'm defining mob testing as mob programming so that I'm just, replacing the word programming. Because, well, I tend to come into these mobs as a tester. I might be a tester in a mob programming team, or it might be that the whole activity that I'm joining into for mobbing is on testing. So very typically, I join different groups of mobs to do exploratory testing in a mob format. That's currently the way that I kind of prefer teaching new people about the things related to how do we actually test, so passing on information that way. But we'll talk about that a little more. So mob testing, it's just a part of mob development, either on the specific testing activities or bringing in the tester perspective. That's kind of the focus of today. So the dynamics of how this actually works is that we have a group of people. Typical size of a mob is, I would say, 6, at most 10 people, but sometimes, especially for training mobs, there can be bigger groups. And my whole team is of size 10 right now, so we typically mob with 10 people at my working place. We set up so that we have usually a big screen or a big projector, and we set ourselves as a group around the monitor so that we can all well see what is going on. One of us sits in front of the table where we have the computer, and one of us usually, especially since we're still practicing on the roles, kind of stands up. And the roles get assigned so that whoever sits in front of the keyboard is the driver. The driver is on the resting position, so the driver rule is you're not allowed to think, or you're allowed to think, but you're not allowed to decide for yourself where you're going, what you're doing. All the decisions come from the other people in the mob. So if you, as a driver, don't exactly know what you should be doing when somebody tells you to, for example, introduce a variable, then the group, the mob, the rest of the people would be telling you, maybe even drilling down letter by letter what you should type, kind of still trying to navigate you on the highest possible level of abstraction. For practice reasons, we usually have someone in the role called a designated navigator. A designated navigator is the single voice representing the whole group while you're practicing being nice to each other. The single voice that the driver will listen to if the group for some reason disagrees and can't kind of like navigate in a consistent way. So the designated navigator listens to the whole group and tries to channel what the whole group has to say. But if there is a call on going one way or the other way, the designated navigator can decide that, okay, the first thing that we're doing is going to be this. Or if there's a lot of different opinions, kind of like deciding we're going to first do this one. That's what the designated navigator does. So the designated navigator usually needs to stand a bit further away from the driver so that especially if you're a quiet person, you don't end up talking just to the driver because you're always talking to the whole mob at a time. And on the practice setting, we usually do that by making sure that there's a physical distance between the driver and the navigator. And the rest of the mob are called other navigators. And over time, we're hoping to learn to work well together as a group so that the designated navigator role no longer exists, but there's just a group of navigators, and we, in a self-organized manner amongst the navigators, kind of take the lead, make sure that we are nice and kind to each other in making sure the driver gets to do whatever we're working on right now. So this is how we usually set up a mobbing session. This whole thing is based on a very specific style of navigation. Strong style pairing is something I also learned about the time I learned about mob programming for the first time. And strong style navigation, it's a great way of also working in a pair settings when you want to create a stronger bond, stronger connection between the two people in the pair. Strong style navigation is based on the idea that whoever is the driver on the keyboard is not allowed to think. And the other one, the navigator, has the ideas and needs to vocalize in words, speaking out loud, whatever ideas they have, so that any ideas from my head as the navigator must go through someone else's hands to the computer. So the reviewer, the continuous review in this style of pairing or this style of navigation, the reviewer is the one on the computer. And the benefit of this style of navigation is really that if you are, for example, having different level of skills on the driver's seat versus on the navigation side, the control of using the time comes from the person on the keyboard. So the more senior person, the more experienced person might have more of the ideas, so would typically then take the navigation role. And we can always switch the roles, and with mobbing we typically switch the roles around, do a full rotation so that the whole group moves around every 4 minutes. So the starting point is that you're on the keyboard only for 4 minutes, and then the next one will again take the place. There's a few rules that are particularly important. The first rule that I find really important in mobbing is to remember that we should have this mindset of yes and. If somebody was just navigating the driver to do something particular, like for example, let's say we were testing a search feature and they had the idea that we should be trying out different kinds of inputs, like can we find Scandic alphabets? And then the rotation is called, the 4 minutes timer goes off and we need to change. We should be continuing with exactly the same idea that we were left off, and we can add to that idea, but we don't replace the idea, we don't drop the idea that was already going on. So it's kind of like saying we all work together in this mob format, kind of as if we were one mind, but one mind that takes the best out of everyone into the work we're doing. Another really important rule is to remember to be kind, remember to be considerate, and remember to be respectful. If we're working all on one computer, we're in the same space, together working on the same thing, all of this niceness, collaboration, consideration, empathy, caring for the others, they turn into being really important things. And having talked to some people who have been mobbing for years, they say that mobbing has actually made them kinder, nicer people, that they have learned a lot about how to treat other people through this type of collaboration. But it's very important in the mobbing settings that when other people, especially if they might be more quiet than you, if they have ideas they want to contribute, you try to pay attention that somebody is trying to speak up and you make room for them. So it's not about you or me showing that I know all the things and I can always be the one navigating, but it's about us together as a group finding a way of working so that everyone gets to contribute. If I feel I'm a senior, I might actually feel like I should be stepping back a bit and only stepping forward when I'm needed, so that the other ones could be learning through the practice of the basic stuff that we do in the mob. And the last thing about the basics is really this idea that when we're mobbing, we're learning a lot, but we also are forming very different perspectives amongst the mob members. What I feel and what I see happening might be completely different than the developer next to me is seeing and feeling. And it's important that usually towards the end of the day or towards the end of a mobbing session, we would go and do an observations retrospective, kind of like a 360 view into what just went on in the mobbing session, asking what happened, what did we notice, what did we feel, is there something about our collaboration that might be noted, about the work we were doing, something where we were particularly successful, or anything that we might be failing at. And usually, especially in Finland, I'm noticing that it's a good idea to kind of run this through writing things down on post-it notes. So I usually have this like advice on like just writing one idea per sticky note, few words, easy to read, capital letters, and trying to make it so that we can have the focus on the discussion around the 360 view on what were our observations and experiences. And this usually gives the mobs, or my mobs that I've been in, have given views into things that I didn't even realize that other people were experiencing, or the other way around. So kind of building the basis for future mobbing sessions. So that's the basic of mob programming. We have the whole group on one computer, and mob testing is just bringing in somebody with a testing perspective, or maybe even making the whole mob work on something which is testing. And I wanted to share you a couple of examples or experiences on personal level on what kind of things have happened to me on this side. About a year and a half ago, I organized a conference. I'm a serial organizer in addition to being a long-term tester. I organized a conference called Tampere Goes Agile in Finland, and I invited as a keynote speaker a fellow called Woody Zuil, who is the father or grandfather of mob programming. He's been one of the original members of the Hunter mob, and he was sharing us this story about how his team has worked for several years, so that every day they come together at the same time at the office, and for the full days they sit in front of just one computer. And when I heard this story, I thought it was kind of ridiculous, that it can't work. That's how people usually respond to very strange ideas. But I also thought that maybe I shouldn't judge so quickly. Maybe I should try things out. So I went back to my office. And I went back to my office saying that I would like to try this thing called mob programming. And the first reactions were pretty much like, no, that seems like it's not a good idea. It's probably going to be wasting our time, and there's nothing we need to learn from each other. We're already all professionals and we know our own work. And we were working remotely a lot at that time. But I didn't give up just getting the first no. I kept asking like, hey, please, I'm feeling that I'm a very social person and I'm kind of isolated right now with everyone working remotely. I would like to try this, like please humor me, let's try this out. And one of the days I had a chance of inviting a fellow called Llewellyn Falco. He's also one of the people from the USA have been working very closely with Woody Zuil. I had a chance of inviting him over to our office to facilitate our first mob ever. Our first mob was focused on refactoring. We had our own code, and we had a rule of cleaning up the code with two basic refactorings. We were supposed to rename things that didn't make sense as they were named now, and we were supposed to extract methods, basically making things more concise, more easy to understand which is the scope of a certain thing. So very simple refactorings. And I remember being super afraid of this whole session. I wanted to do it, but I also wanted to do it for the benefit of my team, so that my team would kind of like gel together better, we would have more fun together, and we would understand each other better. I wasn't particularly into the idea that me as a non-programmer, a tester who didn't really care much about programming, even if I have a computer science background, that I would actually have to sit in front of the computer coding with the others. But that was an inconvenience I was willing to do for a while so that I could get my team to collaborate better. The first time we were mobbing, I remember feeling very much like it was uncomfortable. It was very hard. Whenever I had to sit in front of the computer, people would tell me letter by letter what to write. It had been quite a while since I had looked at code with the thought of what am I actually going to create here. And I remember them telling me, introducing a variable, looking puzzled, and then getting to hear how they told me press V, press A, press R. So letter by letter telling me what to do. But I also noticed that within the 2 hours that we were sitting in front of the computer, I was taking my turns there. It was already picking up like things. I was picking up things like that, and I started realizing that, hey, they don't need to tell me the same thing again, like I can hear it from the first time. And they started telling me other things as we were progressing, and kind of like getting into the feeling. So I really actually started liking it, realizing that there is the ability for me as well to kind of learn this stuff and you know, just go with the flow. So I wanted to do more of that, and my team at that point really wasn't yet so much into it. So I started organizing local meetups. This particular picture here is from a local meetup where we were practicing test-driven development. And it kind of is very representative of how things usually are. With my team, I'm the only woman out of 10. And with all of the meetups, I tended to be always the only woman out of whatever size of a group we had. We practiced C#, we practiced on Java, we practiced refactoring, we practiced test-driven development, and we also started practicing exploratory testing as I wanted to introduce the types of things I would typically do for these groups. But I kind of felt that already from the perspective of being different in the sense that I wasn't a programmer and being different in the sense that I was a tester, and especially an exploratory tester, I was bringing a lot of diversity into these groups. I was always thinking in a bit different way than others, sometimes kind of maybe feeling a little bad about being so different, but over time starting to realize how valuable that is. And we're going to be going back to those experiences a bit more with the summaries. I did some more of this mobbing with my team. I got my team talked into mobbing with me on a weekly basis. It kind of happened so that we decided that we need to be at the office twice a week, and since we go to the office on Thursdays nowadays as well, we decided that there could be something we're doing, and mobbing has been often the activity of choice for us. And from that I started getting more and more comfortable with this whole idea of programming together. And after about maybe, let's say, 8 months of doing occasional mobs with my team, I decided to join a weekend of an all-female hackathon with the idea that I still feel like I'm not a programmer, but I want to see what happens if I don't tell anyone that I'm not a programmer. I joined a group of 4 women, and I introduced to them the idea that I would really like to try this way of working, which is called mob programming, which means that we would use this one computer only, and the group was like, well, yeah, sure, okay, we can try that. The most senior developer out of our 4 people group was like, I don't know, I think I'm more efficient by myself. So she was kind of like saying, I don't really like the idea, but I could do that. But then in the next breath, she also said that she can't actually be there for the whole weekend. She's going to be only available for about half of the weekend. So the 3 of us who are in this picture, the 3 of us would be there by ourselves most of the time. And the 3 of us, we agreed on mobbing. We mobbed to create the game, and the lady in the middle, she was the 2nd most senior developer in our group. The lady on the right, she had never programmed before the weekend, and towards the end of the weekend, the lady who never had programmed said she feels like she fully contributed to the program we created. The lady in the middle said she would have never guessed I wasn't a programmer because we were having such relevant discussions around the code. And the 4th lady, the most senior programmer who is not on the picture right now, she contributed graphics only because she couldn't get additional modules, additional pieces into the program that we were creating because we didn't leave it for her alone to do, but she would have needed to integrate with the stuff we had already created. So for me, this was this whole all-female hackathon was an experience saying that even with a testing background, through mobbing and with the experiences that you have as a tester, you might have actually a lot more to contribute on the programming side, on the actual work, than you give yourself credit for. So all of these great experiences with mobbing, being a tester in a mob, and becoming a little bit more of a developer in the mob, they led me into changing the style on how I teach. And this particular picture here is from UK, where I was doing a course for about 18 people I think I had on the course, and for the full day we were all rotating in a mob format, exploring an application and learning from it. And for me, this whole exploratory testing, teaching in this way and also teaching it in this way with my team, every now and then introducing activities that would be around testing, it gave me a voice that I didn't have before towards my team on explaining what is it that I'm doing, what is it that makes me special, why is it that I always find the problems that my developers are missing. So it was a very powerful experience also in that sense. I wanted to talk to you about the couple lessons that I had from this. First of all, I learned about cognitive dissonance. The idea that my beliefs and my actions need to be in sync so that I feel comfortable with myself is a very powerful one, in the sense that I was saying to myself a year ago that I will never want to be a programmer. I don't want to do that. It's not my thing. There's enough people who are interested in that I don't have to want to go there. But through actually volunteering to do it, I've noticed that I've started to rewrite my history. I'm lucky to have my blog, visiblequality.blogspot.fi, to see that I have completely changed my mind about that again. But by experiencing being one of the people in this mob format, I am rewriting my personal history of how I feel about joining people who are programming on that particular activity. So it's a very powerful way of changing behaviors through doing things in a different way, which will then change your beliefs also to be in sync with the beliefs you have right now. I also had a lot of experiences with my team about mistakes that were happening while we were mobbing, and it gave me a lot of confidence that I am, as a tester, welcome and needed in the mob. I was able to correct mistakes that I typically have to find afterwards while they were being born. Like, for example, I remember this one time when we were mobbing and we were changing components as in user interface components, dialogues, and grids into newer versions or completely new versions of similar components. We needed to replace them, and we had this one feature that we were working on to do the replacement in a mob format. And at some point, the whole team of developers, all guys, all developers around me, they were talking about, is there one or many of these particular things that we would be doing? And everyone in the team, there was kind of this synchronized answers, like yes, one is enough. And we were already starting to implement that with the one. And then there was the single voice of dissonance coming from me saying, what do you mean one or many? Do you mean how the user selects things in this dialogue? They always select several things, and I would show them how they do that. And just a couple of seconds later, the developers are kind of like laughing out loud, saying, well, that would have been an expensive mistake to fix later on. But about an hour later, none of them even remembered this ever happened. So when their egos are not in play, the collaboration and the mistake showing, it's so much nicer, so much easier, that I suggest that you might consider trying it. I also first started suggesting exploratory testing for them, and since they didn't really like the mobbing part so much in the beginning, they didn't really want to mob on exploratory testing because that was even more weird for my team at the beginning. So I started doing stealth exploration. I started suggesting that while we were coding, we would actually start the application in different browsers. I would suggest that instead of using the boring same data that they always use, how about if we use some different user this time? Or what if we would look at a different piece of data through the feature? And we would find bugs while we were building it, because I introduced these changes continuously into how we were developing. And it was interesting that it again was something that the developers would have never really thought about doing by themselves, but it didn't slow us down at all that we were doing it while we were developing together in this mob format. So great ideas were taken into use. Then also my developers started to actually like the whole idea of seeing what is it that I do when I started sharing in the retrospectives, I started sharing what did I notice that I had kind of contributed and what was making me excited about this. They said, like, yeah, sure, fine, let's try your activities too. And I had the feeling overall from these experiences that I've tried to explain to my developers over the last 20 years, what do I do as an exploratory tester? And they just, decide to trust me, that I just love my job. It's just great. But they don't really understand me. But through mobbing and me speaking up about what would I want to happen on the computer, they didn't have to try to decipher something that was happening inside my head, but they could be part of that experience. And I learned that while the product is my external imagination, it speaks to me about where the bugs are. I kind of see shapes on what kind of things we were changing and how those might have an impact on where the bugs might be hiding right now. I also turned into being the external imagination for my developers. Nowadays they look at me and they say, you'd want me to try this, right? And I don't have to even say anything for them to actually be pretty neat and pretty good on exploratory testing. They just need the external imagination, remembering that there are things that I've shown them that they could go back to, and skills they've learned with me. So I feel that we have a lot deeper connection because of mobbing with my developers on the stuff that I would typically contribute. And the last part on what kind of things mobbing really changed for my team is the progress with test automation. We've always, with my team, we've been struggling with unit testing. We've had unit tests, but they've never been useful for us. We've struggled with introducing user interface tests. We've had always one developer kind of taking a tool into use and the rest of them kind of like feeling that they don't know enough to get started. But having the mobbing as a mechanism, we would be mobbing on creating our Selenium tests, and from one person only being able to do Selenium, we ended up with everyone in the team except one who didn't want to do it. Everyone else being able and willing to do Selenium tests, so that we started introducing more of those. And also with mobbing, we've introduced, on the unit testing side, we've introduced a thing called approval tests, which has finally helped us create unit tests that are valuable. They have become valuable because we've been not only introducing the tests, but also we have had the bravery as a team to change our architecture so that it's much more testable than it was before. So it's been a really great experience. We've been doing all kinds of activities, and since I look at things from a tester's or testing perspective, there's been activities where we've been mobbing already on activities that are kind of like happening before implementing, group work on deciding what we're going to be implementing, what's the requirements, what kind of a piece we're going to be doing. We've been doing work while implementing, so doing things together. The amount of work or testing work that we have needed to do kind of when we think things are ready, right before production, it's been going down. And we've been continuously releasing, so we also take activities where we're looking at things while they are in production to learn about things that are in certain way in production as a feedback for things that we might want to change with our product. And sometimes we're doing things where we create test automation, testing as artifact creation, and sometimes we're doing activities where we're exploring together and trying to learn how to better explore. But overall, the effort with mobbing, it goes heavily towards kind of the left side and maybe even the rightmost side while in production. You could think about that as shifting work left because it is feedback for the other cycles of doing this. So this whole mobbing thing is really about building habits, transferring skills over just passing knowledge. So we are creating the experience to work together on this. In the end, I wanted to address still a couple of usual concerns. The most common usual concern is, wouldn't we get more done individually? Sometimes people think that mobbing means that one person works and the rest of the group is just looking around, maybe either reviewing or just making you feel the sense of urgency. That is so not the case. Everyone in the mob is an active participant, and on the keyboard, that's the place where you are not responsible for the decisions. So the decisions come from the group around you. And since it's a group activity, it's really not about getting the most out of your team. It's about getting the best out of your team. So in individual work, every one of us has good moments or good areas of skills, and we have our bad moments or weaker areas of skills. And whatever we're doing, our skills and our current mindset at the point when we're doing things, it kind of ends up in the end result, whether it be code or the task at hand. And what we usually try to do as testers is then find out where were the low points and kind of fix that afterwards. And then we have this back and forth movement on, like, I give you feedback, you fix it, and then I will look again if it was okay. But with mobbing, the whole idea is that when we're in the same room, we can use our skills and specialties at the same time, so that whatever we can contribute, the best of each one of us ends up in the end result, the work that we're doing right now. But it's still not stopping us from going back and looking at things even later on, even if we were trying to make things work on the first time. I find that the best ideas usually win when you care about the work over credit. When you have someone with a great idea who's trying to sell the idea and then run away from implementing, you end up having bad implementations of a great idea because there were things that maybe were not known yet. So the whole idea of working together, you seem to be getting best ideas in that way. And with mobbing, the typical way of approaching this is that if you have two ideas, you do both. Do the most eccentric first. And often you will notice that when you did the funny thing first, everybody says they don't care about doing the second thing anymore after the first one was done. But they would fight you basically to the end when they need to get the credit that their idea got implemented. So it changes the dynamics. It changes the dynamics also from the perspective that instead of building technical debt and not cleaning up, people tend to clean up things a lot more in a group. They want to kind of show their best face. But it also creates this idea that somebody remembers that we've been doing this before, we've been doing something similar. So we turn from technical debt into technical assets more. So we can find more easily things to reuse because there's a group of people who remember what was there. I already kind of mentioned this, the best face forward in a group. The name mob programming sometimes sounds like mobbing is something very negative and people will behave badly in a group. At least my experience is that people tend to want to show their best face in a group. And as a specific example of this, I've had a team where there's one particular person who has had issues with female developers and saying sometimes very bad things to me. And I've never felt very safe programming when I am being picked on with the reviews and feedback when I do things individually, if I have people like that around. But in a mob, it's not mine, but it's mine also. So it really makes us work nicely together, and it's much more unlikely that anyone would say something really bad in front of an audience, whereas they might say that thing to you quite much more easily in private. So it shows also in the way we behave in a group, but it shows also in the way of what kind of things we're doing. We're cleaning up things more because we're working in a group. That's what I've experienced. And the last bit here, building psychological safety. There's this idea that Google published recently in an article that when you have teams with psychological safety, that's the key to really well-performing team. And it also means this psychological safety, it means that everyone in the team kind of contributes about same amounts. Everyone gets to say things. And if you think of introverts who might usually be kind of having trouble getting their ideas even heard, this whole mobbing thing gives the chance for the introverts to actually build over long term this place where they are not working only with random people, but they're working with their friends and they feel safe in contributing their ideas. So while it might be growth, like there might be a lot of practicing and stepping away so that you feel that your energies can recharge. That's something you can do in a mob. You can leave and you can come back later. The psychological safety, feeling that you are working towards a common goal, that's a really valuable thing that you get out of mobbing. My message really to testers like me, or a bit different from me also, is to kind of remember that even if you are not a programmer, you will be having great ideas, even if you didn't know how to turn them yourself into code. And when you get to remove the distance between you and those who are turning the ideas into code, you will get to see that the stuff that you're trying to contribute is welcomed much more open, with much more open arms, and it might be that you're learning things that you never thought you would, and it enables you to do things that you never were able to do while you were having the distance. So out of all this experience, I've written a guidebook with Llewellyn Falco to give you kind of like ideas on how to get started if you want to try this. So the first part of the book, it's very prescriptive in the sense of if you need to get started, here's instructions on what you might want to try. And on the second part, we're then addressing on how do you actually grow the first practice mobs into real mob programming. Sorry, mob programming environment. So I suggest go to LeanPub. There's the lever that you can drag so that you get the book for free. Take the book and get some more advice from there. And I hope the webinar gave you some ideas already. You can get in touch with me, and I love to talk about this stuff more. And I think it's now time to have a bit of a discussion.
Thank you very much, Maaret, for that presentation. Let's just go through one or two more slides I have here very quickly before we go through your presentation. Okay, so tomorrow we have our third and final webinar in our April webinar series, and that will be with Karen Johnson, who will talk to you a little bit about how manual testers can help with automation efforts. And Karen's going to be a speaker at the EuroSTAR conference this year, so it'd be nice to get a little insight into her teachings. If you'd like to find out more about who else is speaking at the EuroSTAR conference, our program is now live, and you can see that on the EuroSTAR website. We also have a 15% discount on our registration before May 31st. And if you can't wait until the EuroSTAR conference, which is taking place in October, we have our first ever EuroSTAR Roadshow, which will be taking place in Warsaw next week on April 27th. And we'll have a number of different speakers from the EuroSTAR program over the years. We have keynotes with Rue Tunison, Rob Lambert and John Foda. We'll have a track talk with Dorothy Graham, who will talk about automation. Declan Reardon look at security testing, and Alexandra Kasapu will look at testing skills, and we'll even have some sessions in Polish with Radoslaw Smilgin and Michael Strajak. And there's a discount code there too for 10% off if you use the discount highlighted there, SPKR16. So finally, let's have a look at some of the questions that have come in here for you, Maaret. The first question I have here is asking, what about the role of facilitator in mobbing, especially for groups who have never done it before?
So with my team, when we started doing things, we didn't have an official facilitator, except for the very first session where we had Llewellyn join us. So usually we were just mobbing without a facilitator. I've noticed that if we don't have a facilitator, I will kind of sort of take that role as being part of the mob. I usually then remind us about the rules, that we should rotate and that there's no thinking on the keyboard, and I will note on things that we might be doing wrong. So someone in the group might also be taking that type of role, or the group just might work really well already. My group didn't work too well in the beginning. In particular, we had a lot of trouble with one person, and the facilitator role on kicking him out until he would stop complaining continuously would have been very needed. And we actually as a group then managed to do that decision, and he came back later when he realized that the rest of us were having too much fun and making too much progress on learning. So facilitators might be able to help with various problems that arise, and especially if you have difficult team dynamics, I suggest using that role there to begin.
We have one or two people here, Maaret, who are asking how does mobbing work in an agile environment?
Well, I don't know about mobbing in any other environment than agile environment because, well, I live very much in an agile environment. It's kind of like a basic starting point for me. We release on a daily basis to production, so we're doing continuous delivery, even though we have very little automation. So in my experience, agile and mobbing, they're kind of the home ground home ground of mobbing is agile. But mobbing also gives you a great chance of learning from the others. So even if you were not agile or you would want to try things like this out, it's a great way of learning from your colleagues.
The next question here is asking, is there any particular way to stop overbearing participants who are drowning out others?
So overbearing?
Those who are taking control and not letting others participate? Okay,
so that's usually where the facilitator would come in handy, or then somebody in the group just needs to facilitate that a bit. I personally prefer talking to those people, and also using the designated navigator role. It really teaches you the pattern of everyone will take their turn in driving. So when you have a designated navigator, if there's somebody who is speaking a lot and kind of like overbearing the others, they will have their turn as the designated navigator. But there's also then a mechanism for us to encourage as a team everyone else to kind of step forward and take the stage on navigating on their own turn.
And does mob testing require everyone to be in the one location to be successful?
I've been recently trialing things with remote mobs as well. I've been following a friend of mine who does regular remote mobs from Finland right now to USA. So no, it doesn't. And I think one of the most famous remote mobs right now is the Cucumber team. They're all around the world and they still mob even if they're in various locations.
Do you always schedule mobs or call them on an ad hoc basis?
With my team, we've had this basic scheduling mechanism that we're having a session on Thursdays on an agreed time. So we have been scheduling them. But the hunter mob, for example, they don't really schedule the mobs because they work that way 40 hours a week. So there's no more scheduling on that. And I have heard from people also kind of like on ad hoc say that they just want to do something together right now. Like for example, actually in my team about a week ago, 2 developers decided to pair on refactoring, and I decided to join them as a third. So we had an ad hoc mob. We hadn't planned for it, but we were working to clean up the code and test it while we were cleaning it up. Kind of like out of a whim.
We have a few people here as well asking how many people could be in a mob team?
It kind of depends on what you're trying to do with your mob. If you're trying to mob so that you are working on your own application, like a typical team size would be something between 6 and 10, and the rule is that if anyone in the team feels that they're not learning or contributing, they should be looking for something else to do. So they could split into 2 different mobs if they feel that they're too big. But very typically, especially these training type of mobs, we could have more people. I've done exploratory testing training mobs with 16 to 20 people. And those are usually then the decision on what size I can cope with it comes from the number of rotations that fits into the time we have available for mobbing. So I want to make sure that everyone in the room will get a chance at the keyboard a minimum of 4 times within the time frame we have available, and preferably even more. So smaller groups rotate faster, and that's why they usually tend to be kind of a lot better in building the team working skills.
Another question here, I think you've already touched on it there. It's one or two people have asked the same thing, and they're asking, how often would you suggest doing these mob sessions? Could it be on a daily basis or a few times a week?
If my team would do what I would hope we do, I would hope we would do them continuously, that we would actually be working in a mob format continuously. I believe very strongly that the experiences we've had on turning 2-week features into half-a-day features by mobbing, it's such a powerful experience that I'd like to see that happen continuously. But I noticed that we have a remote working culture, and people like this isolated work. So for us, the driving factor into once a week is the fact that that's where the comfort level with my developers is at the moment.
There's another question here just asking, would you present a mob on a testing conference?
Yes, and I actually will. I will be, I've been talking to doing that Test Bash Philadelphia, like a demo mob on stage. So so far I've done more like training types of mobs in testing conferences, but recently also kind of these presentation or showing you it in action type of things. So it is definitely a possible thing to do.
That's great, and thank you very much for that, Maaret. I think that's all the questions that have come through for now. So I think we'll wrap things up. We have a few minutes to spare. I just want to thank our presenter today, Maaret, for that very interesting presentation. And I'd like to thank all of you attendees for coming along, and we hope to see you again tomorrow for our third webinar this series. That's all from us here. Take care, everybody.